Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for our live talks. This is the last one for 2022. It's something that we had initiated a few months ago as a way of kind of feeding back to participants, but also because the project deals with a number of chronic illnesses. And sometimes people have questions or concerns or things that they've learned just from participating in the study. And this gives an opportunity for us to share just some ideas and thoughts on different things that are important to health. So we usually start with just a brief introduction about the project, what the LIFE project is about. And I'm going to share my screen now just to kind of do that. And then we can just give you a little bit of background to this study. So this is really what is happening in Jamaica. We have a lot of chronic non-communicable diseases. These are data from the very last lifestyle survey. It's a national survey that took place in 2016, 2017, looking at what was happening across the country. And one of the things that we found was that there was a high burden of chronic illnesses and their risk factors. This first slide is one looking at obesity, which is measured by the body mass index. The body mass index is a way of saying whether or not your height is appropriate, your weight is appropriate for your height. And if your body mass index is more than 30 when it's calculated, then that means that you're obese, not just overweight. And what you can see here from these numbers is that the number of people who are obese increases with age, and that the numbers for women are much higher than the numbers for men. So what you can see here, the women in red are almost double the number of men who are obese. And of course, this sets us up for a number of chronic illnesses, such as diabetes and hypertension. And the second slide here also shows that the pattern that you're seeing with obesity is consistent with one that we see with diabetes, with a higher level of diabetes or rate of diabetes as people get older, and with women having a higher burden of diabetes than men. In fact, when people get into their 70s, you're looking at almost half of the population living with diabetes at that age. High blood pressure is also very common in Jamaica. Not a big difference in men versus women, but definitely increasing with age, to the point that by the time people are in their mid-30s, you're looking at nearly 3/4 of Jamaicans having high blood pressure. And of course, these chronic diseases are resulting in a lot of death. The data here is from 2017, looking at the leading causes of death. And what you can see here is that cardiovascular disease, that's your heart attack and stroke, diabetes, and cancers are the leading causes of death, both in men and women. For men, because of the violence, both from motor vehicle accidents as well as other forms, that is often a higher leading cause of death. But after those causes of death, the main causes of death are these chronic non-communicable diseases, the diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, and cancers. So because of the high burden of these diseases, we decided to set up a cohort study. And so what is a cohort study? It's a little different from what most people are accustomed to. Very often people are asked to participate in surveys where you are interviewed, you have your questions and other measurements done, and that's the end of it. Cohort studies are follow-up studies, and these are studies where we will continue to go back to the same persons who participated to find out what has happened to them since the first time that we saw them. And cohort studies are very useful because they allow us to understand the cause of multiple conditions. So if we're interested in how where you live impacts your risk of diabetes or heart disease or cancer, we can answer that question with this kind of study. And because we're following people over time and looking at them before diseases or any health issues developed, we're able to be more certain about whether or not those factors that we are seeing are likely to be causes of those conditions. So it's a very powerful study method. It's not often done in the Caribbean because these are studies which are a lot more expensive to carry out because it involves a lot of follow-up and usually more detailed evaluation of participants. So it's an island-wide study. It's building on a study that was done previously. So the data I presented, just looking at the burden of blood pressure, diabetes, and obesity, was based on the Jamaica Health and Lifestyle 2-3 study, which is what I presented the data from. And for the LIFE project, we're actually going back to those communities that were part of this national survey. And we're going back to find persons who are in that particular survey to see if they're willing to participate in the LIFE project. But in addition to those persons who are in the last lifestyle survey, we've been going house to house and inviting volunteers who are living in these communities to be part of this particular study. So what does this study involve? It involves a questionnaire. And for those of you who have been part of it or who have been administering it, you know it's fairly long, but it's a very detailed questionnaire because we're interested in understanding what is causing the high burden of cancer, heart disease, and diabetes in Jamaica, but also in the Caribbean. We ask people to give specimens as blood and urine here. We've held off on the saliva because of COVID. And then we are asking persons to let us know if they develop any new conditions which they didn't have at the time that we first interviewed them. In particular, we're interested in whether they go on to develop diabetes, heart disease of any form, which could be heart attack, stroke, heart failure, or any form of cancer. And because this is a follow-up study, we'll be going back to them periodically to find out how their health is and to see if there's been any changes from that initial visit. So how will this help us understand what's going on in Jamaica with chronic diseases? Well, we think that being part of the study helps people to understand better their own health. In fact, when we go through the reports, we find a lot of persons are found to have diabetes that they didn't know they had before. It's the first time that they are aware that their cholesterol levels may have been high or that they were anemic. We've seen quite a few of them, or even persons whose blood pressures are uncontrolled, even though they're on medications, or who didn't know they were hypertensive. So it helps them to recognize that they have health issues that need to be addressed urgently. More importantly for us at a larger level, help us to understand what is causing us to have so many non-communicable diseases in Jamaica and the Caribbean among Black populations around the world. And then we're hoping that with some of the research and the information we're collecting, we'll be able to figure out ways to identify cancer or diabetes or heart disease earlier, maybe just from asking questions or from blood tests. And this is very important as we want to try and prevent as well as treat all these non-communicable diseases. So these are our investigators. This evening, we have the pleasure of one of the investigators, Professor Ashing from the City of Hope Cancer Center, present, and she'll be speaking to us about keeping our mental health secure during the holidays, as well as members of the UWI team, Caribbean Institute for Health Research, and Fox Chase Cancer Center. And everyone is a member of the African Caribbean Cancer Consortium. And then you'll probably be familiar with some of these names. I will be surprised if you weren't, because these are people that you have met in the field or seen sometime during the course for those who have been part of the study and for others who are present. So with that introduction, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll see whether or not Prof. Ashing has been able to get her mic and audio systems working.
Good evening.
Yes, how are you? Good.
I am doing well. So it's just the video part now.
Okay.
It says that I cannot start because the host has stopped it. So maybe that's on your end now.
All right, so that's Janelle can unstop. I think he's going to make you a co-host. I think that is probably what he has to do to allow you to share.
So welcome, and I know it's a few days before the holidays, and we're talking about something so incredibly important as mental health and mental well-being. Still not able to bring on my video. It's
okay, but I'm going to ask Janelle to work on that and show it. But I mean, in the meantime, I can introduce you if that's all right. Okay. So I gave you the introduction to the LIFE project, and you know, and this is an opportunity for you to meet one of the principal investigators for for the project, because this is Professor Ashing. She is a Caribbean-born psychologist, originally from Trinidad, and you'll hear that a little bit from her accent, but she's currently based in the USA. She works at the City of Hope Cancer Center in Los Angeles, California, and she's done a lot of work around improving disparities in health. So in other words, when we look, we find that sometimes persons from certain communities or from certain racial groups don't do as well when it comes to certain diseases. And her work has focused on trying to reduce the gaps in care and the outcomes that we're seeing according to a lot of those conditions, particularly cancer. She's done a lot of work in empowering patients and encouraging persons being better advocates and managing their health better. Her recent book was on cancer survivorship, and I think that one is still a bestseller. She can share with you some details of how you can get those details. And of course, she's an excellent researcher as well as speaker. So we're really pleased that she's taking the time out to speak with us today. As psychology is her area, and mental health. She thought that would be a good area to focus on, especially at the holidays, because this is often, for a lot of people, a very stressful and difficult time. So I am hoping that Janelle, you've been able to make Prof. Ashing a co-host, so she can share her screen, or Joette. I can't make you host. I just have to wait on one of them. But in the meantime, Prof. Ashing, if you want to just say a few words while we figure out what's going on with your mic, so you can share your camera with us.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Prof, for including us in this important work. Like you said, it will make huge strides in our understanding of chronic illnesses, including cancer. And as a component of that, we have these live talks because we want to go beyond just data collection to really working with the community to address, chronic disease burden, and be able to, as Prof said, my work focuses on educating and really activating community members and activates to really work to protect their own health. And so this is part of that series to educate, hear from the community, build alliances, and activate community members to take action for their own health. So I can try again. It's still not letting me. Oh,
yeah, see you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so very much. So because we're talking about mental health and a connection, I wanted to really just have a dialogue on some of the issues that's relevant to mental health. I want this to be informal. Please stop at any time and ask any questions. I can see the chat now, so if you want to, put a question on there, I'm happy to try to answer those. I don't see, I don't have the full screen, so I don't know who's raising hands. So please let me know if there's someone, with an urgent question or issue, because I really want this to be a dialogue, given that the topic is so relevant to overall well-being. So when we talk about mental health, it is a broad term that can start from emotional well-being to mental illness. And oftentimes when we hear mental health, we think only of mental illness. additional stresses that many of us experience. And so we wanted to focus and address this. So the World Health Organization and PAHO and many regulatory agencies talk about mental health and mental well-being as an important component of individual well-being, family well-being, societal well-being, and even the well-being of the country. It comes down to the individual. One of the things that we know that is so critically related to mental health is, as Dr. Not sure what happened here. I don't know if you can hear me, but
yes, we're hearing you again. I'm not sure why the signal wasn't so strong. Maybe without the camera might be safer.
For some reason, my video went out again without me doing anything.
Right. Hi, Profesh. You want to try without the, okay. She's reconnecting. I want to see if she can try without the video in case it's slowing down her signal a little bit. So, well, she's still reconnecting. Okay, I understand she's reconnected, but not without any audio. All right. All right. So I think I see my good friend is here from the north, from the Jamaica diaspora. Claudette Powell.
Oh, yes. Hi, good evening. I'm in my car, so I can't put my video on.
That's all right. That's all right. Okay, good to see you.
Yes, good to see you.
Yes, and when you're in Jamaica, you gave a very powerful talk on mental health.
Yes.
In that group that we had, and I thought that was a very telling point that you made, because sometimes people don't recognize the interconnectedness of a lot of things, and that not feeling right, it's very hard to do a lot of things that are required for managing chronic diseases.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Because it does take a lot of effort on your part, in terms of, because we know that chronic disease care involves a lot of choices around eating, being active, taking your medications. And if you're not feeling right or just not motivated, it's hard to kind of keep that going.
That's right. Yes. Wow, the technology is giving a hard time tonight.
It is, but it's a good thing we went beyond the technology.
Yes.
But I think, and then also I think I know a lot of chronic diseases, as you had mentioned when you spoke, was a lot of chronic diseases also can impact somebody's mental health, because when you're not feeling well, it does make it harder for you to sort of, do the things that you have to do, or people get discouraged, I think, a lot of times when they have these illnesses, all these tablets to take and doctor's visits, it can be a little bit of a downer.
Of course.
Mm.
Good evening.
Hi, Desreen. How are you? Okay, this is welcome to Jamaica. Yeah. So we're waiting for Kimlin. So we're just talking a little bit about mental health and chronic illnesses. And so that's just the connection.
They're definitely connected, because you can imagine if you're not feeling well, even if you're having a day with even a headache.
Yeah.
That's not a right day for you. You're going to be down somehow. So it's just that with some persons, that type of feeling can linger for a long time when it becomes abnormal.
Right, or problematic.
Or yeah. And I've always told my patients, it's okay. Everybody gets a down day, a blue day. But if you're constantly getting them and can't sleep and crying and all sorts of things, then something is not right.
Yeah. And then I think a lot of times we don't focus a lot on our emotional sides. I know, like Jamaica, when you ask people how they're feeling, they'll just say, I'm stressed. So everything is stress. But I mean, okay, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling angry.
Yes.
So that kind of, and I don't think it's unique to Jamaica. I think a lot of Caribbean persons don't tend to focus a lot on the emotions that they're feeling. And sometimes, it manifests in different ways, because you may be more physical as opposed to just talking about how you feel, or you may decide to just drop some things that, are too challenging, and just try and focus on things that you're able to manage better.
Yes. And the Caribbean people, everything is all right. It's all right.
Yeah.
No problem.
Well, yes. Well, I mean, yes.
I'm back in.
Hi, Kevin.
So I'm not sure what happened. I got logged off. I still don't have camera access. I did share a brief presentation with Janelle. Maybe he's able to share it.
Okay, all right.
And I'm not able to turn on my video again. I'm not sure what happened.
Okay, all right. So Janelle is here. So I'm gonna we're just bantering away. So I'm gonna let Janelle kind of see if he can share your presentation, and then you should be able to see it, and then you could work from there. I want to see if it's in my email.
I didn't send it to you. I just sent it
to Janelle. Okay, that should be fine.
While he's loading it up, let me know when he's loaded up, because okay. So one of the things that really has impacted how we see mental health, both our own as well as our neighbors, is COVID-19. During that pandemic, we were all isolated, and the world has changed. And what it has taught us is that mental and emotional health are so critically important. And it created a dramatic, just talking about cultural shift in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, and globally, to be more empathetic with ourselves around our mental, emotional well-being, and to be more empathetic to our neighbors as well, hopefully. And there's an increased acceptance and uptake of the benefit of mental health professionals, because sometimes we're not able to cope with it on our own, using our family resources or even spiritual resources. And mental health professionals, such as myself, are more widely acceptable in all cultures. And so I hope that if people are feeling that they're needing some additional support from a mental health professional, that's okay, with themselves and with their family.
Mm-hmm.
So there's such a strong connection between mental and physical health. These are so intertwined, as we see that we can have an increased risk for mental well-being issues. For example, if we have cancer. And also studies show that if we have mental health challenges that are not addressed, such as depression, that can give us an increased risk for things like heart disease. So it's really important to address our mental health well-being. And if we have a chronic illness, to be attentive and responsive and seek, help from our healthcare providers. Let them know that if, unfortunately, if you have a cancer diagnosis, that it is impacting your health-related quality of life. And that's when we talk about quality of life, which is, for healthy individuals, and health-related quality of life, because we know that medical and physical illness does affect your overall mental well-being. And, there are two pathways that happens, right? So one of the pathways is the neuroendocrine system that affects hormones and mood. And then the other pathway is through the immune system, where if we are psychologically very depressed, it also depresses the immune response. So how we're able to fight off illnesses, toxins, pathogens like bacteria, virus, parasites, is diminished if we have unaddressed or unattended to mental health issues. And we know that mental health issues also affect both physical and emotional pain. So being able to pay attention to how we feel and be able to put words and language to how we feel does make a difference in terms of getting in touch with those emotions and helping us to manage those emotions in a healthy way. So some of the factors related to, our own mental health, right, is biology and genetics. So depression tends to run in families, as well as things like dementia. So if we know we have a family history, oftentimes culturally, again, we don't talk about these things. Mm-hmm. We want to be, hide it under the rock. These are of no fault to anyone. It's not a curse. Depression is very common. 10% of any population experience depression at some point in time. As we're getting older and people are living longer, issues like Alzheimer's and all of these neurological issues are increasing, right? They may also have, and hopefully we'll spend some time talking about more about that. These factors may also be related to diet and how our diet is changing. And so I'll spend some more time talking about that. So there are environmental factors, right? As we become more modernized, we have more cars on the road, more toxin, more pollutants in the air. Our air is not as clean, especially in urban environments, as it used to be when we had less sort of, industrialization, less cars on the road, all of these things. Medications affect our mental health and well-being. So if you find that your medication, when you go on something new or they increase or reduce the dosage, that it affects your mood, your ability to sleep, have the conversation with your healthcare provider. It could be related to your medicines. And of course, there is what we think about more often as related to mental health and mental well-being issues is what we call the socio-ecological context. So family, if there's disharmony in the family, lack of unity, no stability in the family in terms of the family constitution. And we know that there are different forms of family, right? We can have extended family, we can have blended families, but nonetheless, if there's stability in that family, it helps us to feel secure and improve our emotional well-being. Loss, if we have a death or illness in the family, that affects not only the patient, but it affects others as well. And stress, we were talking about that. Life can be stressful, but there is something like more distress, which is a more prolonged chronic situation where we feel helpless and hopeless and can't address it. That, of course, affects our emotional well-being and finances, of course. And especially this time of year, there's so many ads. I mean, I listen to the Trinidad radio stations a lot, actually, not the ones here in the US. And they're advertising the banks, you know, to take out a loan to buy gifts for Christmas. That's just putting you in more debt. So people are feeling stress of having to do all of this gift giving and not going back to sort of culturally just getting together with family and eating good food and just spending time together and building relationships and family harmony rather than, you know, buying gifts. So, and also food can affect the mood. And so want to talk some more about that. Any questions or thoughts as I move in? And I guess Janelle's not having much luck with the.
I don't think he has seen it, but I think the points you make now about the holidays are quite important because there's that stress as well. But I think sometimes even for people, the holidays may be a reminder of loneliness for those who don't have anyone to connect with, or are in an environment where they're not that connected or bonded with anyone.
Yes, and definitely isolation is a double-edged sword. When we feel down, most of us want to self-isolate. So, but what does that do? It just exacerbates the problem because now you're more isolated, you're feeling more alone, you get more down and depressed. So one of the key sort of coping is really to build those social connections. So if you have no blood relative, a lot of times in our Caribbean culture, we have what is sometimes called fictive kin or comadre or compadre. So these are people that you grew up with, who are close to you and who know you. So it doesn't always have to be a blood relative. It could be your faith community, you know, but building connections and building community, we are social beings. We are meant to interact. You know, from the time of birth, you know, babies smile at just, you know, 3 weeks. This is to engage. This is to engage the parents. So that's who we are. And if you need people, that doesn't mean that you're weak. We are just, you know, created that way. And sometimes the quality of relationships. On the other hand, Prof, we could be in, you know, a household full of people and feel isolated as well because we're not bonded or connected, and they're not deep relationships where we feel that, you know, the people in your own household understands you, especially if you're feeling down. There's still, you know, some shame and stigma associated with that. And sometimes we hide our feelings thinking that we're protecting our family, but it doesn't, right? Because it comes out somehow, some way. And ultimately, it's best to, and even in health, what I call a family, because you may not want to tell your business to everybody in the family, but you know someone who could be your champion, that health champion in the family, that one person who could advocate for you, and you know that they have your best interests at heart and could help navigate the family system so that you get the support you need.
But when you're trying to reconnect, we spoke a little bit about even some of the phrases that we use in the Caribbean, you know, Jamaica, no problem, that sort of thing. In other words, the idea of something not being right is sometimes not something that is in it. The things that we say and do are sometimes things that work against us, because while it's good to have a positive attitude, it may also be a little bit of a barrier to truly trying to understand how we feel. And I think the other thing that we're talking about is that in the Caribbean, we often don't express our feelings. We tend to just kind of say we're stressed or other things, but we don't want to acknowledge sometimes what it is that's going on inside.
And you know, I think that is so true and so pervasive across the Caribbean culture, to not, you know, really express feelings, especially what we happy, you know, all the time. And no one is, you know, happy all the time. But finding that honoring our feelings, I think sometimes is really, really hard for us as Caribbean people. And making that shift sometimes takes time, because we don't have a lot of permission to kind of, you know, talk about these feelings, as you're just saying. And it's sort of honoring our culture, but challenging our culture at the same time, because culture is dynamic. And yes, we have this cultural heritage. And I believe that a lot of that kind of holding in actually comes from our slave history, right? Where we were not allowed to emote, and our days and our lives were controlled. And so I think some of that is coping, right? That was adaptive coping for us to survive. It's no longer useful, but it helped us survive. And so we hold on to that. And so giving ourselves permission and honoring our feelings and emotions, and giving ourselves that permission to have volitional control, to say, you know, I'm not always, you know, don't worry, be happy. That I'm feeling stressed today about this. But like I said, it's finding that trusted person, whether it's a family member or a friend, a neighbor, or someone in your spiritual community that you really trust, to be able to provide that support. And if, you know, sort of the family support, still you're needing some more, giving ourselves permission for professional support as well, I think is so very important.
Yeah. I guess the other thing too is, I mean, there's a lot more talk about mental health. But I think we still have a lot of ideas that only people who have extremes of emotions or something else like that are people who have are having some mental health issues. In other words, if you can't get out of bed, then that is a mental health issue, but not if you are still able to function and do certain things. Maybe not 100%, but they don't see that as a mental health issue, or maybe anxiety that you're not able to sleep or rest, or you're tense all the time as a mental health issue. What are some things that I guess people can think around to sort of broaden the idea of what mental health is about, and what how these different issues could manifest? It doesn't have to be an extreme. It could be even sometimes not as extreme, as we see where people have major depression and may decide to hurt themselves, etc.
Yes. And so when we hear mental health, that's often what we think about is mental illness. Remember, we're talking about the whole spectrum of well-being, right? And like you said, Prof, it could come in the form of, I mean, paying attention to ourselves, but also our family members and our loved ones. So if you see changes in eating, someone eating, you know, way more than they normally eat, or not having an appetite, that is a sign of, you know, some emotional distress. Sleeping, you know, I mean, we all have nights sometimes when, you know, we don't sleep our good, you know, 6 to 8 hours. And keep in mind, 6 to 8 hours is what we need in order for our brain to rest and to feel, you know, rested and well the next day. But we all have, you know, nights when we may not get. But if it becomes habitual, then that's another sign. You know, if you know your partner tossing and turning, that could be a sign of, you know, emotional distress. Mood changes, you know, people, you know, not having the patience that they normally do, you know, being more aggressive, having more anxiety, or just, you know, seeming depressed and not having the energy, not the sort of you know, depression, clinical depression, where, you know, you literally can't get out of bed, but you're getting out of bed, but just your emotional state is more labile, changing from kind of minute to minute, flying off the handle. You know, one word that someone says may just, you know, throw you off. So those can be a sign of, you know, emotional distress and wanting to isolate, as I mentioned earlier. You know, if you find yourself, you know, not wanting to do the things you normally do, hang out with the people, and as we say in Trinidad, you know, lime, then you know something is wrong. If a Trinidadian don't want to lime, then you know something's wrong with them, and someone intervenes, right? One of their partners will intervene. And importantly, substance use. And in the Caribbean, because oftentimes we have this habit of binge drinking from time to time, that could be seen as, oh, it's just, you know, Uncle Joe just doing. But if it's out of his sort of normal sort of, you know, drinking a little bit on the weekend and drinking more often, drinking, you know, combining other alcohols, as well as smoking, you know, cigarettes or other kinds of combustibles that we know is Caribbean, you know, if those behaviors increase beyond sort of their normal sort of day-to-day functioning, then you want to check in with your loved ones, because it could be a sign of, you know, beginning of emotional distress where they're not coping and managing it in the way that they normally would. So I have what I call sort of the 5 S's in terms of sort of more adaptive, you know, coping strategies. One of the things is, you know, having social contact. So just call that person, text them. I mean, you may not be feeling it because you kind of want to isolate. So social contact versus segregation and isolation, right? Reach out. And if the first person you reach out to don't respond, don't take that as an insult. They might truly be busy. It's not that, you know, you're unloved and all of these things, especially when you're feeling down. We can have this vicious cycle of, you know, a downward spiral of thinking, right? Oh, this person, you know, I'm not lovable. I'm not, call the next person, right? You must have more than 2 or 3 people on your contact list. Reach out to someone in your faith community, reach out to someone, you know, if you have a good colleague at work. So social isolation versus segregation. So segregation is the enemy, social contact is your friend. Spirituality, if you use spirituality, that's a great coping mechanism and strategy versus shame of whatever it is. Shame is the enemy, spirituality can be your friend. Share. So oftentimes when we're feeling down, it actually is a good time to push ourselves out of our comfort zone and give. That may be a good time to clean out your closet and look at all the stuff that you forget you even have. You may even have stuff with tags on it. You may even have stuff that you haven't worn in a long time, may not be able to fit you. Give. So share instead of shopping. So don't use retail therapy, as they say. That just makes the matter worse, because now you have more stuff in your house to take care of, more thing to manage and watch. And whereas you could, you know, be cleaning out some of the stuff that you have and giving it to someone in need. So sharing could feel really, really good and help your mood. Sunshine. We're in the Caribbean and we kind of forget sometimes that that's important. And especially in our work environment, you know, we work in air-conditioned environment. We go to work early in the morning. For many of us, maybe I'm speaking to myself, get out late in the evening, and we have not, you know, been exposed to sunlight, which is great for vitamin D and great for mood improvement, and it's free. We want to practice sun safety, of course. So early in the morning is better. And so sunshine for health and well-being versus shade. Also, last but definitely not least, is self-love, appreciating who we are, our gifts and talents, as well as our challenges, because we all have them, we're human. So self-love versus self-hate or self-loathing. So thinking positively about you, about me, because that's where it starts. If we could think positively about ourselves, it'd make it easier to be empathetic and to be positive about others.
Very good, very good. Thanks, Profashing. And then there was a specific concern that one of our nurses brought up, which is about men. And emotion. So I mean, I did see a lot of the things here, and I think sometimes some of those solutions are things that women tend to do a lot more of. So women tend to reach out and create networks a lot more aggressively sometimes than men might, and maybe more social. So that may be for them protective. But I don't know if there are any special things that are important for men, because nurse says men don't cry. In other words, men don't show their emotions on their sleeves, and it's not a kind of contact that they tend to do. What are some tips for men in particular around emotional health and safeguarding emotional well-being that you may have?
So important, because all of the things we mentioned for general population tends to be exacerbated for our men. And, I want to say that families need to practice those behaviors with their young boys, their grandsons. I have 3 children, and I have to remind myself, he just turned 18, my last, to hug him every day, because, at that age, they think they're men, and, they want to go about their own thing. And just remembering to hug every day, at least once, to have that contact and that emotional bond. It's so important for us to practice that with our boys, right? Because as we know, charity begins at home. So the father in the household, or the uncle in the household, if there's not a biological father, the grandfather, and keep that as a practice, and not say that's only for babies, because that's where those lifelong beliefs about men don't cry and men don't hug and men don't feel comes from, and it gets perpetuated from generation to generation. So breaking that cycle is important. I have to remind myself, because he's a big guy, he's off on his own, in my own situation, and it's like, okay, come, we have to hug. And I could feel the sort of that manliness, that exterior that he has, that he's building already, kind of come down when we hug, because it's such an important kind of connection and human bond. And so I think that is so important, and to be able to be supportive of our men when they talk about emotional, to encourage for them, again, just like we were talking about, to put words to it and not just have it bottled up. And so other men who have sort of made that stride need to be role models for their mentees, teachers, faith leaders need to be good role models for our men in that regard.
All right, thanks, Prof. So I think we have a few minutes, and I didn't want us to just keep talking without giving members of the audience an opportunity to ask their questions or to share any points on this topic that they think are important. I mean, I'm going through the chat, I'm not seeing anything, but I mean, I think one of the big things that is coming out now is really around you know, as you said, the connection between our mental and emotional well-being and so many of the chronic illnesses. I mean, we're looking at what is happening in the Caribbean now with very high rates of diabetes and hypertension. And we wonder sometimes if some of that is really just a manifestation of issues with emotions and things that we've been dealing with from early childhood.
Yes. And so emotional eating is very, very real, right? So a lot of people where it's, you know, these foods now that has become so popular in the Caribbean, and you know, living in the US for a very, very long time, almost 40 years, I really have always rejected the typical American diet. It's very, very high in processed foods, very, very high in animal-based eating. And you know, honoring our traditional eating a lot of root vegetables that we eat. I know we love our rice, and especially in Trinidad, we love our flour because we love our roti. But this high fructose corn syrup, it trains the brain to crave more of it. It makes you lose that sensitivity to true taste and texture. And you just want, it's like a drug. You just want this immediate rush of sugar that the corn syrup gives you. So these processed foods actually, as Prof was saying, leads to inflammation too in the body, and it's more susceptible to diabetes, as well as mood disorders like anxiety and depression. So actually that you know, eating, that stress eating does not help. It actually makes the situation worse. So it's much better to call a friend. It's much better to have a healthy serving of fruits and vegetables. And we have so many fruits and vegetables in the Caribbean that's local. So avoiding some of the American imported foods that has become so popular, you know, grapes and apples. I mean, they're okay, but you know, a Julie mango is so much better than that. There's no comparison. There's absolutely no comparison. And it's fresh. You're getting all the nutrients, all the vitamins that you need. And so, you know, sort of these processed foods that has been marketed to us from, you know, the US really just creates the effect that we've been seeing, right? The obesity, the diabetes, the sluggishness, all of these things are related to that. So it's a very vicious cycle. And moving back to what we know, peas and beans, seeds and nuts, all of our fruits and vegetables, all of the root vegetables that are complex carbs that doesn't raise your glycemic index, like you know, Irish potatoes that we've learned to love to, or rice or white rice. Those things peak your glycemic index really fast after eating it. Whereas yams, sweet potatoes, all of these things, yes, it's complex carbohydrates, but it doesn't affect your body in the same way. So staying away from those processed foods, eating more like we, you know, traditionally eat. And I'm just thinking, as I was thinking about this, man, a good pumpkin soup with some yam and cassava, and you know, if you like a little corn dumpling, is so wonderful. And you put your spices, your ginger, your allspice, and it's beautiful eating, and it's so healthy for you. And going back to that, as opposed to what's been marketed to us now, you know, the Pizza Hut, the Kentucky Fried Chicken. I haven't been in Jamaica a long time, but they're all over Trinidad, and people are buying up that stuff as though their life depended on it. And actually, wonderful, wonderful, rich variety of colors and textures and tastes of our root vegetables and our our fruits. It's just, it's just wonderful, and it's nurturing to the mind and body.
Yes, yes, yes. All right. Let me see. I'm going to see if there are any additional questions. I think the last thing I kind of want to, so I see somebody talking about the food being the key as well to emotional health. So I see that's an important point.
Yes.
And then
and physical activity. So along with the food, that gives you the energy, that gives you the gut health that you need. So all of this wonderful food I was talking about helps your whole GI. As we age, there's all these things, sluggishness, constipation, all of these things. It's in that processed food that we're eating. Go back to the natural foods that we, grew up on and learned to love, and the physical activity. So at whatever level you're able to, whether it's a brisk walk or a slow walk, any movement is better than none. Dancing by yourself, with your kids, with your grandkids, with your partner, you could do it at home. You could just, cut up that floor. You don't have to go out to do these things. So, yes.
And then of course you mentioned the rest and keeping social as important things to help to maintain that. I like your 5 S's. Being social, sharing, the sunshine. Let me see, what is a self-love? Self-love. How do we practice
and spirituality?
And spirituality. How do we practice self-love though? That's the last point I kind of want us to just end on at this point. What are some things that show that we're practicing this self-love?
I think it's honoring who we are, that we are. Let me get spiritual on you, and I hope that that's okay with you, because that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
And so seeing that you are special creation of God, and that that all of who we are is God's good creation. But it's our growth, right? It's our growth and our opportunity to honor who we are and become the full persons that we're intended to be. I see it as a process, so that allows us to be gentle with ourselves when we make mistakes, to forgive ourselves, to forgive others, and embrace all of who we are each day. As we wake up, thanking for this gift. So it's gratitude, as opposed to complain, because and it is a process. So being patient and gentle with ourselves.
And somebody's asking for us to review the 5 S's.
Oh, okay.
So we just spoke about self-love. Yes. Okay, well.
Social contact versus segregation and isolation. Spirituality versus shame. Sharing. Clean that. Feel good about giving to somebody who is less fortunate and who is in need, especially this time of year. So sharing versus shopping, sunshine versus shade. Remember that, vitamin D, and self-love. And part of that self-love is healthy, healthful, tasty eating, getting back where your taste buds become alive again and could taste all that good stuff. I mean, I'm really thinking about that pumpkin stuff.
Yes, I realize that.
And and just embracing all of who we are, and especially this time of year, appreciating the family that we're close to, and reaching out to the ones that we may not be so close to and say, hey, you crossed my mind, just thinking about you. It could be a text, doesn't have to be anything more than that. And trust me, those reaching out so good because you have honored your relationships and you have gone outside of your comfort zone and you have initiated a social contact. So hopefully this was helpful, and I will try to share what I've created so you could put it on, the live website as well as the presentation that somehow didn't get communicated to Janelle.
Okay, and then I am supposed to also share something. I'm trying to find what I'm supposed to share actually. And I am thinking I am sharing the screen now.
Oh yes.
All right. Because I think sometimes even we don't have sometimes as many professionals or places where people feel like they can reach out to when they need help. And this is something from a flyer that we've created and share with patients, especially if we come patients and participants, if we come across any of them who may have any emotional or mental health issues where they need an outlet or a source. Most of these are Kingston, the Bethel Baptist Church, the Bureau of Gender Affairs, Mustard Seed Community, but the Ministry of Health actually does have a hotline. It started and was strengthened around the time of COVID, 888 New Life, which is 24/7, and they can actually help to connect you with a network of psychologists and mental health professionals, not just in Kingston, but across the island through different networks. And that's an important resource that I think can be helpful, especially if you feel that something is not right and you do need someone that you can speak to or reach out to. So I think that is it. Thanks very much, Prof. Ashing. Thanks for your very timely presentation and the tips. I think the 5 S's, I've written them down. I'm repeating them again, which is making social contact. I'm not going to do the other S's. I'm just going to focus on the positive ones. It's the social contact, the sharing, the spirituality, the sunshine, and self-love. And I think going forward into 2023, it's good for us to kind of take stock of these things and make sure that we practice the things that will help to ensure that we have and maintain good mental health.
Thank you, Prof. And thanks everyone, and have a safe, blessed holiday. And I will share some of the resources that I shared this evening.
All right. Thanks everyone. Thanks for all those who joined us. Have a good night and a safe holiday season. All the best for 2023. I think we'll see some people again soon. Know that things are a little better and that things are a little colder.
And eat some of that rum cake for me.
Well. I have some, somebody just left some for me today, so I'll tell you how it tasted. Oh boy.
You could also put it in the mail, Masha.
Yes. But
all right. Be safe and well. Happy holidays. Right. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thanks, Janine. Thanks, Joy. Thanks, everyone. All the best.